Describe the role of Laura's mother in shaping Laura's perception in the garden party. মিসেস শেরিডানের ভূমিকাটা কী ছিল? অ্যান্সার: মিসেস শেরিডান is determined to leave everything to the children about the preparation of the garden party. It is no use asking her. She asks Laura to forget that she is her mother. She also asks her to treat her as an honored guest. Mrs. Sheridan asks Laura to instruct the hired men to make the tent for the garden party. She gives Laura a new hat to win over her opposition. Laura is praised for her beauty. She forgets about the accident. Mrs. Sheridan asks Laura to send the surplus leftover sandwiches, cakes, puffs to their nearly grieving neighbor, Mr. Scott's widow, wife, and her 5 little children, who are the poor creatures. Laura tries to imitate her mother, but she loses her calmness when she doesn't find a place to put bread and butter. She is ashamed and tries to look severe. After hearing the news of death, she wants to cancel the garden party. It is a sign of her psychological and moral development. It is also a sign of empathy and consideration. She has perception that death is nothing but a peaceful sleep. When accidentally she walks into the room of dead body. Question: she had one of her brilliant ideas. What idea is referred to here? Answer: there on the table were the surplus sandwiches, cakes, puffs, all uneaten, all going to be wasted. Mrs. Sheridan asks her daughter Laura to send the perfectly good food to the poor creatures. At any rate, it will be the greatest treat for the children. It is the idea that is referred to here. Question: she knew all along it was a mistake. What mistake is referred to here? Where? Answer: Laura crossed the broad road. Then she crossed smoky and dark lane. A low hum came from the mean little cottages. Laura bent her head and hurried on. She wished that she had put on a coat. Her frock shone very nice. She had the big hat with the velvet streamer. She asked herself if the people were looking at her. They must be. It was her mistake to have come to her neighbor, Mr. Scott. She knew that she should not go back. She couldn't realize it. Why couldn't she realize? Question. Laura was going down the hill to Mrs. Scott's house where a man lay dead. She couldn't realize it. She stopped for a minute. It seemed to her that kisses, voices, tinkling spoons, laughter, the smell of crushed grass were somehow inside her. She had no room for anything else. Describe Laura's transitions from reality to illusion. Answer. Laura dares to go beyond the limit of Mrs. Sheridan's garden. When accidentally she sees the dead body of Mr. Scott, she becomes aware of the fact that life is wearisome and death is a peaceful sleep. She feels his face to be wonderful, beautiful, and happy. She begins to cry. She says to him to forgive her for her hate. When she sees the widow woman, 5 little children, and the dead body of Mr. Scott, she shifts from reality to illusion. Dreamy atmosphere of the garden party is vanished quickly. Explore the symbolism of the Sheridan family's garden. In the garden party, Katherine Mansfield shows the sharp contrast between the wealthy family and the laborious family through the symbol of garden. Mr. or Mrs. Sheridan, that means Sheridan's family, lives in a sophisticated home with a well-maintained garden. There are the trimming lawns, the shining daisy plants, grass, roses, green bushes, etc. in the garden. Especially roses impress people at garden party. Mr. Scott's working family lives in a little mean house with a dilapidated garden. In the garden patches there were nothing but cabbage, stick hens, and tomato cans. The rich family of Sheridan is absorbed in a luxurious garden party, concentrating on its arrangement and decoration. The poor family of Mr. Scott is concerned with sudden accidental death of only breadwinner. There is a gulf of difference between Sheridan and Mr. Scott. Mrs. Sheridan's garden represents affluent family, upper class. Mr. Scott's garden is the representation of the working class people. It symbolizes their poverty-stricken condition. Mrs. Sheridan's garden symbolizes their status of luxury and pleasure. How does the garden reflect the contemporary society? Question. Answer. In the garden party, Katherine Mansfield shows the sharp contrast between the affluent middle class family and the working class family. Through the symbol of garden, it symbolizes the class consciousness, the innocent youth, and the death's inevitability. It symbolizes the conflict between luxurious party and tragic reality of death. It also reflects social awareness, complexity of human feelings, behaviors, moral values, and social division. Discuss the various themes as exhibited in the garden party. Question. Conflict. Answer. In the garden party, Katherine Mansfield shows the world of the same privileged class and the picture of the poverty-stricken people. The affluent family is concentrating on the preparation of the garden party, while the working class is concerned with the death of the only breadwinner in the family. A sharp conflict lies between the happy mood of the garden party and the sorrowful state of the poverty stricken working class man named Mr. Scott. Mr. Scott is killed in an accident. He leaves his wife and 5 children on the earth. Laura is the daughter of the middle class Sheridan family, artistic daughter. She takes the responsibility to arrange the garden party. After hearing the news of death, Laura expresses her desire to cancel the party to show respect for the dead neighbor. The conflict lies in the upper classes' disagreement to sacrifice their pleasant mood for the sake of the working class neighbor. It reveals social division. There is an internal struggle between Laura's happy mood to enjoy the garden party and her feelings of reverence to dead body. Irony. Irony lies in the point of view which makes a blank space between Laura's sympathetic insight and real fact. The happiness of a perfect day for a garden party is described with the grim reality of the neighbor's death. Her attempt to try to perform like her mother reflects an irony. There is irony between information and theme. Laura's thinking ability and her experiences of hardships, pain, and pleasure. Song. Joseph's song highlights the contrast between Scott's death and Laura's following epiphany. The song reflects ideas of life's weariness and the inevitability of death. It shows that she is worried about trivial life. When she sees Mr. Scott's peaceful dead body, the song reflects Joseph's unsympathetic attitude to the reality of death and criticism on the mood of the garden party. Imagery. The imagery is used to highlight the subject matter through the grim reality of Mr. Scott's death. The writer uses the imagery to show the difference between Laura and Mr. Scott. Mr. Scott's death and Laura's concern with the garden party and her new hat are expressed through the imagery. Hat symbolizes sharp contrast between the wealthy family and the working family. Mr. Scott belongs to the working class people. They live in poverty. Mrs. Sheridan belongs to wealthy and affluent upper class community. Her hat symbolizes the world of luxury and pleasure. Describe the social awareness. Answer. Katherine Mansfield describes the consciousness of different classes, innocence, maturity, life's weariness, and inevitability of death. The theme of contrast between the happiness of the garden party and the stern reality of death is expressed here. It reflects social awareness, empathy, complexity of human nature, and social division. Laura is ashamed to wear new hat in front of the little cottages. She is ashamed to deliver the surplus, excess food to the dead Carter's home. Yet she shows her family's moral values. When Laura brings the basket filled with the leftover sandwiches, cakes, and cream puffs to her grieving neighbor, Mr. Scott's family, she wants to leave the basket. Accidentally, she walks into the room where Mr. Scott's dead body is kept. She recognizes the poor man's face to be wonderful, beautiful, and happy. She begins to cry. She says to forgive her. For on her way, her brother Lori tries to comfort her. She says, "Isn't life?" Laura's sister makes sings, "This life is weary." The song expresses the experience of tiresome life, confusion and responsibility. Katherine Mansfield expresses the idea of innocence, confusion, and responsibilities through the characters in the essay The Garden Party. Laura's moral and psychological growth is highlighted here. Mrs. Sheridan asks Laura to order the worker to prepare the tent for the garden party. Laura oversees the arrangement. After hearing the news of death of her nearly neighbor Mr. Scott, she wants to cancel the party to show her reverence to the dead body corpse. Mrs. Sheridan asks Laura to take the basket filled with the leftover surplus sandwiches, cream puffs, and cakes, all uneaten foods, to the poor woman, the widow, and 5 little children. Laura takes her family's responsibility to deliver the basket to her grieving neighbor Mr. Scott's family. Accidentally, she enters into the room of the corpse, though she wants to leave the basket at the Mr. Scott's home, and she wants to remain unseen from the neighborhood. Unexpectedly, she is brought before the widow. She identifies the poor man's face to be wonderful, beautiful, and happy. She starts to cry. She asks him to forgive for her hat because the hat symbolizes her privileged class. On her way, she meets her brother. Lori, she stammers, "Isn't life?" She can't explain about life. How do people behave in the Sheridan's garden? Answer: there are couples strolling, bending to the flowers, greeting, moving on over the lawn. They are like bright birds that have alighted in the Sheridan's garden for one afternoon. They are on their way to go nowhere. All people are happy to press hands, press cheeks, smile into eyes. Why are the Sheridans forbidden to set foot in the neighborhood? When the Sheridans were little, they were forbidden to set foot in their neighborhood because of the revolting language and of what they might catch. But since they were grown up, Laura and Lori, on their prowls, sometimes walked through. It was disgusting and sordid. They came out with a shudder, but still, one must go everywhere, one must see everything, so through they went. What is Afshar? Answer. People like nearly neighbors don't expect sacrifice. আমাদের কাছাকাছির মতো যারা প্রতিবেশী, from the wealthy people like Mrs. Sheridan. It is not very sympathetic to spoil everybody's enjoyment. If Laura cancels party, it is very absurd to cancel the party. If you like our education, please like, share and subscribe the YouTube channel Adwitiya.